Polarising is definitely a word I would use to sum up Jason Horne-Francis, but the Port Adelaide young gun is putting together quite the career so far, and using his trajectory and how Port Adelaide use him in 25, he could genuinely go to a scary level next year, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So what's quite incredible about what Horne-Francis has been able to put together since going home to Port Adelaide is that last year he was the member of a pretty exclusive club, which was the 20-1 club. Alongside himself, Marcus Bontempelli, Isaac Heaney, and Chad Warner all averaged over 20 disposals and a goal a game. All four of those midfielders are obviously very good players, but the ability for Horne-Francis to be able to rotate through the middle and then go forward versus the other three midfielders there who were majority mids who didn't really need to go forward all that much unless you were Marcus Bontempelli and being sent forward by Bevo in an elimination final for some stupid reason, although that is a whole nother discussion. Horne-Francis's potential has not fully been reached yet, and that's a scary thought for the rest of the competition. If we just have a look at where he ranked at Port Adelaide last year, we will see some pretty interesting numbers. He was equal second for contested ball and hard ball gets, and was number one at Port Adelaide for average clearances and score involvements. Being around the ball as a bona fide mid, it clearly meant that Horne-Francis was able to ply that midfield trade, and considering that midfield mix of not only Horne-Francis, but Zach Butters, Connor Rozee, Ollie Wines, and Willem Drew, to be able to stand out in that way at just 21 years of age, mind you, is an awesome achievement. We can even go to some other stats at Port Adelaide as well and note that he was ranked number 2 for coaches' votes, number 2 in the best and fairest runner-up, and nearly pipped Zach Butters just quietly, with the 5th most disposals as he was the number 1 inside 50 player. That number 1 inside 50 player is not all that surprising considering that he was used as a deep forward on occasion last year as well as a pure half-forward flanker. Is that the best way he can be utilised? At this point in time, the answer could probably be yes, not only because of that diversified midfield mix that Port Adelaide have got at their disposal, but also giving him a break from centre clearances and still having the threat of him going forward means that Ken Hinkley and the rest of the Port Adelaide side have got an extra weapon up forward. Yes, they did go get Jack Lukosius last year, but the future of Todd Marshall is still up in the air. Charlie Dixon is no longer there, which means a lot is going to fall on the shoulders of Mitch Georgiades. And considering that Port Adelaide don't really have a flock of small forwards they can rely on, Darcy Byrne-Jones and Sam Powell-Pepper, yes, they do play forward of the ball, but aren't bona fide small forwards. Willie Rioli is still too inconsistent, in my opinion, and if we're going to sit here and think that Joe Berry is going to be the answer to all of life's problems, maybe a little bit irresponsible. I can't wait to see Joe play and think he's going to be a very good player. Does that mean that he's going to be the saviour of the small forward brigade? The answer is probably not. Yes, someone like a Nick Watson had an outstanding first year with the Hawks, but that being the expectation for every small forward moving forward is going to put unwanted, unneeded, and probably unjustified pressure on the next wave, of which Joe was, being the second small forward to be drafted after Essendon matched a bid for Isaac Kako. But back to Horne-Francis, being 5th at Port Adelaide for disposals means that if he is able to get that disposal count up, his numbers are only going to improve, which are already stupid good to begin with. So the real question needs to be asked, how much of Horne-Francis's role is going to be self-induced and how much is it going to be balanced? Because if you can think of Horne-Francis getting 27, 28 disposals in a game, Port Adelaide are going to dominate in the midfield, especially when he is surrounded by the aforementioned guys, whereas unless Jack Lukosius, Willie Rioli and these guys do stand up forward, Port Adelaide is still going to be left longing. Now, I'm of the personal opinion that Horne-Francis definitely needs to be at worst an 80-20 midfielder, but of course I don't blame anyone for thinking, what does that mean for Ollie Wines? What does that mean for Zach Butters? And can Connor Rozee play that half-forward role? Well, there's an argument to be made that if Horne-Francis is going to be a full-time mid, so should Rozee. He's older, he is the captain, therefore, with the talent that Rozee possesses, what does that midfield mix look like? If I'm being really honest, I would say that Ollie Wines may not be part of Port Adelaide's midfield moving forward. I'm not suggesting they should have traded him at this point in time because he could be a good depth piece, thinking Matt Crouch at Adelaide, for example. But if you can tell me Lukosius can get it right Mitch Georgiades can have a really good year and that forward line is functioning, you can't tell me that Port Adelaide going into a final series where if they don't perform, Ken Hinkley will probably finally be gone. You can't tell me that you wouldn't want Horne-Francis, Rosie and Butters at that centre bounce, even if a guy like Willem Drew is having a tagging presence in the last quarter of a final. Do you sacrifice that a little bit or have Drew come off the wing or even the half-forward flank in order to pick up his player and give those three the best chance at moving the ball forward? Because looking at what Horne-Francis was able to do last year across the entire competition, he was the number 1 ranked mid-forward of last year. He was the number 2 ranked forward, the number 3 ranked player at Port Adelaide according to AFL player rankings, and the number 2 player at his age. Yes, as good as Horne-Francis has been, Nick Dacos is going to be rated higher, and rightly so. And this trajectory that he is on is impossible to ignore. Again, it may be impossible to ignore his forward 50 presence as well, because if we look at his offensive one-on-one wins, it's increased by about 30%. Last year, he won 14.3% of his offensive one-on-ones. Last year, he won nearly 44%. Now, to put that into context, the previous Coleman Medal winner, Jesse Hogan, won 50% of his offensive one-on-ones. Yes, out of every offensive one-on-one Jesse Hogan was involved in, he marked the ball 50% of the time. That's half. That is bonkers. And Horne-Francis is just 6% behind him, who is not only a key forward, is just a guy who is going to expose a small defender of the opposition. Yes, guys like Sam Taylor and Harris Andrews aren't going to be matched up on him, but if he can get a mismatch inside the forward 50, he's just going to take you deep, and that is his forte. So many of his goals last year, in fact, over 55% of his goals last year came from set shots. So his ability to be able to take apart a small defender and create an offensive one-on-one victory for Port only means they're going to score more when he is in there. Therefore, he obviously can't be a 100% mid. Again, we come back to that magical word though, balance. But everything else is going upwards as well. Check this out. His player rating has gone up every year, 7.2, 10.5, and now just over 12. His coaches' votes went from absolutely none at North to 34 and 75. His disposals went up over 4 last year after a little increase in 2023. His clearances, even though he spent more time forward last year than the year before, went up to nearly 6. The goals that he kicked went from 4 to 16 to 27. And his score involvements went from just over 3 to just over 5 to just over 7. It is going to be impossible to predict what that looks like this year because we're unsure of his role, but this is a 21-year-old who's just growing into the best version of what he can be. And if you're telling me that moving forward he is going to be on par statistically with Bontempelli, Warner, and Heaney, even though his disposal output was considerably less than those players, I am not arguing that point at all. None of them are also 21 years of age. The comparisons to a, current veteran and former champion, although I'd still argue that Patrick Dangerfield, whilst he's still playing, is still a champion. The comparison between the two just reads so true because he's got that burst from stoppage. People are going to criticize his foot skills, even though, weirdly, not a lot of Brownlow medalists are good kicks of the footy. Oh, but what about Dusty? Yes, you are going to have some exceptions, guys. But seriously, Lachie Neale is not a great kick. Neither is Patrick Cripps. Neither is Ollie Wines. Neither was Matt Prittis. But in terms of he and Danger, the fact that they are the big-bodied midfielders, like I said, have got that burst from stoppage. What did Dangerfield look like at 21, and how does Horne-Francis compare? Well, like this. When we compare those seasons, Horne-Francis has got him by nearly 5 disposals, 2 inside 50s, 2 clearances, and 1.5 marks. Now, does that mean that he is going to always surpass Danger? Of course not. I still think that is a good point of comparison, though. What his 2025 is going to look like is going to be ultra interesting, and personally, I would love him to be a half forward in the All-Australian team. The reason why I would love that is because 20-1 is kind of what you require to be in that territory. Chad Warner last year was an All-Australian half-forward who, again, did the same thing as Horne-Francis did, but a bit better. So if Horne-Francis can do what he did last year a little bit better, then we have got a real conversation on our hands. Let me know if there's another player that you want me to talk about. Fingers crossed you guys enjoyed this video. Like it if you liked the video. Subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy family. We've just hit 4,400 subs at the time of recording, so thank you very much for that, and let's keep adding to it. Hope you're having a really, really good week, and I will see you in the next video.